I was a perfect candidate for porn addiction.
Right.
Because so much research shows that so many people, shame and the sense of there's something wrong with me, I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough. A sense of that is what sets somebody up to become addicted to corn, because corn will give you this pseudo sense of love, acceptance, a high escape. It can't love you back, but it will also never reject you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into Uncensored with Brittni De La Mora, where I share culturally relevant topics, mostly pertaining to sexuality from a Christian perspective. I am so glad that you are here. You know, over the past several months, I have been bringing you testimonies from women who have been in the adult industry. They've been on OF, and their lives have been transformed. And you guys have said that you've been really inspired by their stories. So today we're going to switch things up a little bit. You are going to be hearing from a man who has battled with addiction to corn, and Jesus Christ has set him free as well. He had a 12-year battle, and I am believing that his story is going to bring you tools, the tools that you need to find freedom and healing. So stay tuned for this episode of Uncensored with Brittni De La Mora. Ben, thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited that you are here.
Brittni, it's so good to be on this. You know, it's not every day that I get to be on a show that I watch regularly. I just love what you're doing and what you and your husband Rich are doing with Love Always Ministries. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to get right into it. You struggled with an addiction to corn for 12 years. Can you tell us when you first experienced corn and how?
Yeah, it was around the age of 12 that some of my friends introduced me to pornography. I should say corn, but back then...
For the sake of the algorithm.
Yeah, for the sake of the algorithm, corn. I was introduced to corn at age 12, and back then it was just printed pictures, nude images. But several months later, some of my friends introduced me to hardcore corn, and that was through a VHS tape. And they showed it to me, and I remember the first time I saw it, I was so shocked and disgusted and equally curious and intrigued. And in that moment, it was like time stopped, and my body was flooded with neurochemicals or dopamine, things like that. And after a couple seconds of watching it, I was so shocked, so disgusted, I got up and walked out of the room because I had a Christian background. I knew I shouldn't be watching this. But after a minute or two, after walking out the room where they were still watching corn, I walked back in. Yeah. The curiosity drew me back in. And that is what, that initial exposure is what led me to 12 years of being stuck and in addiction. And I didn't know what it would cost. I didn't know how long and how much time and how much shame and guilt and failed promises to stop that it would cost me. And it took, Yeah,
I can relate to, like, because my first experience with corn was kind of the same way. We lived in a condo neighborhood growing up. And there were these guys that were a little bit older than my girlfriend and I. And they're like, hey, we want to show you guys a movie. You want to come over? And we're like, yeah, sure. They take us upstairs to the room, and like me and my friend are sitting on the floor. It's in like their dad's office. So one's sitting in those little roller chairs and a couple others are standing around. And they play this movie and these people were having sexual intercourse. Right. And you could see everything. And I remember going to my friend, oh my goodness, you're not supposed to show this stuff on TV. This is illegal, because I was always taught, we watched regular TV and like we were taught you're not supposed to show those things on TV, and so I said that and my friend was like, shh, it's a corno. Like, shh. She was so embarrassed because I had no idea what it even was. I was probably like 12 or 13 at this time. And I just remember looking down like with so much shock and shame and embarrassment. And yeah, like I never went back to X-rated corn until I actually got into the industry. After that, like from time to time, I would watch a little bit of softcore. But it's interesting how even like I didn't grow up in a Christian household, yet I still felt and knew and believed that that was wrong, that you
Right.
shouldn't watch people in those moments. And then the wild thing is I ended up making those moments, which is so crazy. And so what was that like second experience for you? Like you said that you went back into the room, but then obviously you had an addiction. So like when did you go back? Was it shortly after, or what
You
was
know,
that like
what
for
was
you?
so interesting was when I went back into the room, I ended up watching it probably for 10 or 20 minutes. And it was a completely different experience than that first time viewing it, even though it was only a couple minutes apart. It was like the first time seeing it, so shocked, so disgusted, um, walking away, feeling bad, and then it was like I fought through that shame, that guilt, that conviction, perhaps back then, even as a young Christian of the Holy Spirit, and willfully went back to it. And for 10, 20 minutes, it's like moment by moment, the shame was like going away, being medicated. I was like exposing myself willfully to this stuff, and the shock started to go away. And but walking away from that experience, sure, there was shame, there was guilt, but there was so much intrigue. There was, when can I do this again? When can I watch this again?
Wow.
And then the second time, I think, was several weeks or a month later, with my same friends who had that same VHS tape, us getting together and them talking about how we were going to watch it. And me even going, well, I do want to watch it, I do want to fit in, but equally in my soul going, I hope we don't. You know, I know I'm not supposed to be doing this. And that continued for months. They would continue watching that same film, and I was always split, like with the conviction of it, but also the intrigue of the newness of this, the lure of it, the escape that I felt when watching it.
And I feel like that's why so many people that are struggling with corn addiction battle with so much shame, because it's like they really enjoy it and it's pleasurable, yet at the same time they feel like they shouldn't be doing it. So because they're going against their own conscience,
Yes.
it creates like this level of shame, which is why I believe specifically in the church, so many people are in bondage to it because they are afraid to get open. They're afraid to open up about that. So you said that you were conflicted, you were split down the center for a while. At what point did this become an addiction for you?
I would say that quickly masturbation became an addiction, and this was before high-speed internet, before smartphones and whatnot. So I was seeking out porn when I could, whether it was pictures or magazines or VHS tape, or sometimes through dial-up internet. But it was probably 4 to 6 years before high-speed internet and just the amount of access became so immeasurable to corn. About 4 to 6 years where it really became a severe addiction. And even back then, I was battling I don't want to do this, yet part of me wants to do this, and going through what I now know as the binge purge cycle. I'll binge for hours, several days, make promises, this is the last time I'll do this, try and abstain for a week, sometimes even several months, but end up back right in it, which is so common with addiction.
Oh, yeah. I never had a corn addiction, but I did have a drug addiction. And it was the exact same thing. It was like I'd get down to the last couple pills or hits of whatever I had. It was like, okay, this is going to be the last time. Like, I'm going to just enjoy it, go all out, and then
Yep.
I'm never going to touch it again. And then the next day I'm on the phone trying to get some more,
Yes.
And so addiction is addiction. And my heart goes out to anybody that is struggling with corn addiction today. And I want them to know that there is freedom and that Jesus can change your life. He did that for you, and we're going to get to that. But I would love to know, like, how did your childhood play in a role in you watching corn? Like, were you able to even open up to your parents about this? Like, what was that like?
Absolutely not. I learned at an early age that my parents weren't safe. And so I just learned that intuitively as a kid by either sharing things or, I would do certain things or just learning that they weren't there, oftentimes emotionally.
Yeah.
Like when I was sad, when I was crying, when I was upset, when I was angry. And so at an early age, just growing up in a family that talked about Jesus, but so often didn't model Jesus.
Wow.
We went to church. My dad was in ministry, and yet he was physically and emotionally abusive. He was an alcoholic. And then my mom so often didn't intervene, didn't stand up for me. And so that taught me that, or it communicated to me that I'm the problem in the family. What I knew as a young kid was fear, rejection, and the sense of worthlessness. I truly believed that I was worthless, unlovable. I'm the problem. Like, rather than knowing what I know now is that there was dysfunction in my family. My dad had problems, my mom had problems, and they didn't love me the way they should have. After years of therapy and recovery and being able to see things 2020 now.
Yeah.
And so at a young age, dealing with that trauma, that rejection, that sense of worthlessness, I was a perfect candidate for porn addiction.
Right.
Because so much research shows that so many people shame and the sense of there's something wrong with me, I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough. A sense of that is what sets somebody up to become addicted to corn, because corn will give you the pseudo sense of love, acceptance, a high, escape. It can't love you back, but it will also never reject you. And so for me, for a moment in time, it was like I could be loved, accepted, wanted by the person on the other end of the screen. And I wouldn't be rejected. And I didn't know that at the time, but that is one of the reasons it was so addicting, besides the dopamine and how my brain got rewired. But one thing I've learned is we need to do a much better job at questioning our corn use rather than simply condemning our corn use.
That is so good.
Why am I going to this? What does it have to do with my story? And this is what I think is one of the most sadistic things about corn. The reason there's so many varieties of it, storylines, type of it, is because it is preying off of people's wounds. We eroticize. There's this whole field of study called sexual addiction, or certified sex addiction therapy. And one of their things they talk about is the arousal template. And everything that somebody is attracted to, everything that tempts somebody is uniquely tied to their experiences early in life, especially their sexual experiences. And so when you've been wounded, when you've been hurt, when you were exposed to things you shouldn't have been at an early age, so often subconsciously in the present as adults, we're playing that out again.
Yeah.
We're trying to find closure. We were taught that to be loved is to be rejected or to be dominated, or the only time I get attention is when my dad is angry and aggressive and abusing me. Well, that can set somebody up to be attracted to types of corn where those themes are played out. And so exploring that in my story, I started to really see that, oh, this is why I'm going to it. This is where I need to be healed.
That is so good. And honestly, I have so much empathy for people as you're talking. My eyes are getting watery because I know, we've gotten so many emails through our ministry, lovealwaysministries.com, and there are people who seek out like abusive corn, you know, where they're being talked down to from the performer and cursed at and belittled, and they're so addicted to that and they crave that so much, and it always makes me wonder what their childhood looked like who was abusing them, who was cursing at them, who was making them feel unworthy. And I see that even in my own life that played out, like, you know, not to go too much into detail, but I was very vulgar and mean to myself in my scenes, and that's because that's what I grew up with. And I find myself recalling myself the same names that my mother called me
Wow.
in the scenes. And so, I mean, I had to really take a step back and really look at that as I've healed on my journey as well. But I know that that's where that came from. And so, yeah, I think that this is all just like unfortunately, so many of us are just so broken because of the upbringing that we've been handed. And it's like, I love the saying that says that what you went through wasn't your fault, but the healing is your responsibility. And I think that we can all give ourselves grace, especially if you're struggling with corn addiction. Give yourself grace. Like, don't beat yourself up, but do exactly what Ben is instructing you to do, and look at the why, right? Because porn is an escape, but it's never going to lead you to freedom. And so if you keep running to it, it's just going to put you in further bondage. But what you need to do is look at the root. Like, when did I first start looking at this? How did it make me feel? And why did I keep going? What pain, what emotion was I trying to numb? Was it anxiety? Was it rejection? Was it fear? Like, what was I trying to mask? Because if you can get to the root, then you can start healing the root. And so I love your testimony. It's so powerful. I know that you had some mental health issues already, but how do you think that corn affected your mental health?
Oh, it was terrible for my mental health, especially as in college, trying to follow Jesus, being involved in a campus ministry, sharing my faith, being invested in. Whenever I would go back to corn, I would isolate. The last thing I wanted to do was to talk to God or to share Jesus with somebody or share with my friend. And share with my friend what I was going through is what I mean. I would shut down. I would isolate. I would feel so depressed. It's like shame would set me up. Rejection would set me up. The sense of worthlessness being triggered as an adult, feeling like a failure, would set me up to go to corn. And for a moment, I would escape those feelings. But then when I was done looking at corn, it would come back. The shame, the sense of worthlessness, it would come back with a vengeance. And I would feel even more depressed, even more full of shame. And so then oftentimes that would lead to a binge cycle where then, okay, I'm already feeling so depressed. I'm already feeling shame. I looked at corn last night. I'm isolating. Well, might as well do it all over again tonight and then the next night. And so the cycle of binging and purging I went through was shame and depression, corn, binge, worse shame and depression, isolation, corn, binge, worse shame and isolation and depression, and then normally several days of just, God, that was the last time, and just feeling so depressed, and then finally telling somebody, confessing to God, and then thinking I was finally free. Because I didn't know I was addicted. Wow. I didn't know what was happening in my brain and how I had rewired pathways. I didn't know that corn was releasing so much dopamine and that it was so addictive. You know, we can get to this later, but I, as I went on to then get free and lead healing groups for people to quit corn, so many people, not so many people, but several people had dealt with drug addiction too. And one guy in particular, I remember telling me, I got off of cocaine and I was addicted to that, but quitting corn had still been a battle for him. He was like, nothing, like quitting corn addiction was so much more difficult than cocaine.
Why is that?
I think because it's in our pockets. We're in a cornified world. It's all around us. I think because it releases so much dopamine. I think because of the endless novelty of it, and because it's free financially, but never free relationally, mentally, you know, obviously the impact on the corn stars, the industry. Never, it may be free financially, but it's not free in any other way. There's always such a high cost to it.
Okay, what would you say? I hear a lot of people that say that only Christians feel conflicted about this issue because they're taught that it's wrong, but people who are living quote unquote freely in the world, that they have, that it's just like, well, I don't have a conviction towards it. It's totally fine. Like, and obviously I know that's not true because I know plenty of people that are in the world who reach out to our ministry desperate for help. But what would you say to that person who's like, I have no conviction. Like, this is totally fine for me. I'm not a Christian, not a believer, and I love it.
I think it's an assumption that people make and a baseless claim.
Why?
Because there are, I mean, for example, if you've ever heard of NoFap, 4 million monthly users, I believe. One of my buddies runs it. He's not a
Wow.
Christian. And all you have to, this is all anecdotal, but 4 million people, the majority are not religious, are not Christian. They're trying to quit corn because they're seeing how it's leading to ED in their lives.
Yep.
They're seeing how it's ruining their sex lives. They're seeing how it's taking up way too much time and it's causing brain fog, and the neuroscience research coming out about frontal lobe atrophy and with the withering away of the higher reasoning and judgment portion of your brain.
Wow.
They're seeing, like, if you honestly take morals aside, if you take an honest look at corn and what it does to your brain, the world, your relationships, you can't reasonably deduct that it's a net positive for society.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't harm you. And so millions of people are trying to quit who are not religious, and many of them also feel, I've talked to so many people, also feel the shame and the guilt and of it. And I have those conversations all the time because I share what I do as a speaker and author and my story. And so often people who are not Christians say, yeah, I feel that way too. I feel shame. It's like this secret thing that I keep doing, and I'm trying to stop watching it less. And I'm going, yeah, like, you don't hold to the Christian sexual ethic or these particular morals, but for reasons and the harm you're seeing it do in your own life, you're trying to quit.
Yeah. And what about the person that says, well, I watch it every now and again, and it actually helps my sex life? I've had people reach out that say, my wife and I enjoy it together. Like, what would you say to them?
I think that many of us will often tell ourselves things to try and convince ourselves that it's true.
Right.
But if we honestly take a look at it, doesn't it cause comparison? Like, just start asking yourself these questions. Does this cause comparison? Does this actually cause me to be more focused on what's the next type of corn I could look at, or the next type of thing, because what God has given me in this relationship isn't feeling satisfying enough. And you start trying to go outside rather than, it's this whole concept of the grass is greener on the other side, but it's not. Just water your own yard. And so
That's a good word.
if we focused on, if there was, I think about the creation story, Adam and Eve, when God, there was no comparison. Like, there was no other Eve for Adam to compare his wife to. There was no other Adam for Eve to compare her husband to. And yet corn introduces this endless variety, endless comparison, and endless things that are not about bonding and relationship, and it's so detached. So I think if we get honest, we might find some of those answers.
I completely agree. Okay, so I want to know, how did you find freedom from a 12-year corn addiction, and what was the most helpful tool for you?
There's a lot of things that helped lead me to freedom, because now I've been free since 2013. If I'm doing my math right, it's been almost 12 years that I haven't gone back to corn or masturbation. The first thing was having a vision, like a God-given vision. One of my mentors instilled this in me. He was a certified sex addiction therapist. He was also a pastor. What is going to keep you going and fighting for sexual wholeness in your life? And for me back then, it was, I want to get free so I can help other people. And I want to one day have a godly marriage and family where I'm not bringing this in to my marriage, and where I can live into God's good design. And so those two things really motivated me they still motivate me to abstain and to be celibate and whatnot. But that was the motivation. And I wanted to honor God. I was like, Jesus gave everything for me. This is the least I can do to honor him. Second thing was I got into a group, and it was a year-long group that the material was written by a certified sex addiction therapist. And I would say that's where so many people struggle to get free because they don't have the tools. I tried everything that I knew of until I was 22 and got into this group. And the resource we were going through was talking about the neuroscience of addiction. And for the first time, I realized, it's not that I just don't have enough willpower. It's that my brain has changed, and I need to know how to change my brain. The resource was working through the trauma and the why, and I started to put the pieces together. This is what sets me up to be tempted. It's not like I'm walking around having a great day. I just read my Bible and boom, the temptation overcomes me. No, there's so many, that's what it feels like. But until you become more self-aware, you realize, that thing caused me to feel rejected. That conversation happened. I saw, my ex-girlfriend or whatever. And all of that stuff started to bring up this pain from childhood. And then I started to desire, I started to desire to go to corn to escape it. And then the last thing that really helped was developing a life of no secrets with 3 other men in my life. Every day we were calling each other, texting each other, talking about how we were doing emotionally. We weren't just waiting until the moment of temptation to throw up like a Hail Mary to try and get out of the temptation. We would do that, but that was the last resort. We developed this lifestyle of reaching out. Hey, man, I'm just walking to a meeting, and here's how I'm feeling, a little bit anxious about this. And I know if I don't check in now and this goes unresolved, that is going to set me up to want to cope later. Yeah. And so a lifestyle of reaching out rather than acting out really helped as well.
That's so good. And you and I were kind of just talking about that because a lot of people know that I had this battle with insomnia for a couple of years. And I was telling you, what I do during the day affects me in the night. If I'm on my phone too much, if I drink coffee, it has the potential to affect me in the night, right? And so it's kind of the same thing. You're saying these things here, if it's running into an ex or having kind of a rough patch or anxious about a meeting, those can affect you if you don't process those things. And then you might run to the path of least resistance to find relief, which could be in corn. And so I love that you can recognize those things and just be mindful and aware of those things, because that's how you can set yourself up for success. I would love to know, what was the difference? Because you told me off camera that there was a time where you tried behavior modification, right? Like you did all the right things to correct your behavior, but you didn't find freedom from that. So what was the difference between that and then how you actually found freedom?
It was that I was fighting the wrong battles. So often we wage war against our sexual struggles, and we are memorizing verses about why sexual sin is wrong, which for me just caused me to think about sexual sin all the more, rather than going to the root issue. Okay. We say accountability will help you, but the way we often set up accountability is once a week confession. It's like I isolate throughout the week, I look at corn, nobody's helping me, and then I come to a meeting with my accountability partner on a Wednesday morning and share all the things I did, as opposed to what if it was every day I'm having a life of no secrets, that accountability partner, I'm reaching out to, hey, I'm feeling anxious right now. Hey, I'm feeling depressed. Hey, I'm believing this lie, and we're doing life together. Or, hey, I'm feeling tempted. What if I had daily support, proactive support, rather than reactive accountability, which many of us live? Another thing would have been just praying that God would take this away. And I've seen him do that. I've seen him set people free.
Yeah.
But for most of us, it's going to be a process because he wants to heal deeper things that are leading us to corn.
Amen.
I'm so glad I can say this now. I'm so glad that God didn't take away the corn addiction with just a fervent prayer. Because for me to get set free, it was 4 years of meeting with a certified sex addiction therapist, 4 years of being involved in a group with the daily support, the guys who supported me every single day. I matured and grew so much as a man. Anxiety went down in my life. I became so much healthier. I overcame so many lies I believed from the trauma, like the sense of worthlessness. I overcame so much fear. I got a life that I never thought would be possible.
That's beautiful.
I started to have deep bonded relationships where I was fully known and fully loved. And I started to be able to experience God's love, because shame and what I was caught up in prevented me from receiving God's love so much.
Yeah.
And so the hard work was such a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. And I think too, the community is so important, like versus just accountability. Like if you're just using it to just check in after you've sinned, that's not actually accountability. That's like, it's confession, as you call it. But God designed us, created for us to be in community with others. That's why the church exists, so we can be in community. I just met with a therapist recently that said men make men and women heal women. So if you are a man, get in a faith-based community of men, because men make men. And if you're a woman, surround yourself with other women in the faith. Join a Bible study. Get connected. Link arms with your sisters in Christ, because you're going to get healed from being around them. And I can attest to that. Let me tell you, before I became a Christian, I was afraid of women. Like I had no women friends. I only hung out with men because I was broken by a woman, the woman that was supposed to love me and nurture me, care for me, my mother. So I couldn't even be around women.
Right.
I was shocked when I started being able to open up to women. And then when the Lord called me to lead my first female Bible study, and I actually had the desire to do it. And I was just like, wow, Lord, I have grown so much. Like I can't believe. And that it was a great life group. I had like 28 women in my Bible study. It was powerful. We were all getting into the presence of God. And I just love it because it didn't start with me leading women. It started with me getting into a women's Bible study and learning that, hey, I can trust people. Like nobody's 100% trustworthy, but they have to be trustworthy enough, right? And these women were women who were walking with God, and I knew that being around them was going to heal me. And so I love that. The community is so important. Another thing that I've heard you touch on a few times is how corn rewires the brain. Can you tell me how it rewires the brain, and also how can you wire it back to a place where your brain feels like it's never even seen corn?
There's been a lot of studies done on this, but I remember reading a book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge, and he's a psychiatrist. And one of the things he shows in the book and quote studies on this is that how the neurons in our brain that fire together wire together.
I've heard that one.
And so as we repeat the same thoughts, as we engage in the same behaviors, the same beliefs, the same actions, our brain is trying to make things easier and easier. Kind of like muscle memory, thinking back on if you learned how to play an instrument or throw a football as a kid or whatnot, the more and more you did that, the easier it became. And then you didn't really have to think. Like you could, at least consciously, you could have a conversation with somebody while throwing a football, or you could play the guitar and start learning how to sing, because your brain is becoming more and more efficient at repeating the same behaviors. So add to that corn, which releases so much dopamine, and engages the reward pathway in your brain, which is engaged when eating food and you're just like, oh, this meal is so good. It marks it down in your brain. I need to do this again.
Wow.
But corn, with all the dopamine, with repeating the same behavior, what happens is that the things that set you up to go to it, rejection, feeling alone, feeling worthless, believing that you aren't good enough, as that keeps coming up in life, and corn marked down in your brain is the quick fix. It's so addictive. The allure of it just keeps coming up again and again, and the more you go to it, the more cemented those pathways in your brain become. And that's why, for me, 5-10 years into it, I was like, I don't get it. Nothing in my life has been this hard to overcome. I just kept going back to it and making promises to stop. Nothing I'm trying is working. And that was because I was fighting the wrong battles. I was just trying to stop the behavior rather than figuring out, why do I go to this, understanding how my brain had been rewired, and then learning how to rewire the brain. Norman Doidge also says that the neurons that fire apart wire apart. And so we know this from Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that over time, as we challenge those old thoughts, as we engage in new patterns, as we reach out for help, engage in new behaviors, our brain starts to rewire.
That's
So
good.
for me, as I did the work and engaged in that recovery process, what was so interesting was, before recovery, before healing, before knowing why I was addicted to corn, walking around feeling rejected, something happened, or I was in college and I failed a quiz or failed a class. I didn't know, but that set me up. That was bringing with it all the trauma from the past, and then corn is how I coped with it. In recovery, I learned, okay, that stuff is going to set me up. So when I'm feeling rejected, when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling worthless and afraid, I need to reach out for help, for encouragement, to call one of my friends, one of the guys I was doing life with. And that became my new healthy coping mechanism. Or I needed to also, and I did this a lot, sit with God and challenge the lies I was believing. Okay, I'm not a failure. I'm loved. And I would think about times that he showed me his love. You know, I would think back about this time I went to a worship service and I was crying the whole time and I felt God's love and approval of me. And so I would challenge the lies with the truth, but also think back on an experience. And these became new healthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
And my brain started to default to those in the future. So it was a couple years in where I started realizing, I can't remember the last time I was tempted to look at corn.
Wow.
And now 12 years later, my brain has been so rewired by God's grace that I'm not tempted to look at corn.
Yeah.
My temptation is to not reach out now to somebody. That's what I get tempted with. It's like my temptation is to isolate, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I am feeling one of these feelings. I need to reach out for help. That's where my brain goes.
I love that. I love that. That is so powerful. And your brain has been rewired to the point that you have actually been porn, masturbation free and practicing celibacy. Can we say the word today? For 11 years.
Yeah.
11 years. So how exactly do you do it? Also, memories. Do like images pop up in your brain? This is kind of like a long question. Do the images pop up in your brain? You already said you don't feel tempted anymore. So how are you doing it? And like, if there's any images, like what do you do to combat that?
The first thing I would say, well, it sounds cliche, but God's grace, like it is, he's been so gracious to me to help me, to give me the Holy Spirit. That's what I love about being Christian, is God lives inside of you. And so every day, what I try and do is throughout the day, if I noticed I sinned, or I was tempted to look at somebody, or I was angry at somebody in my mind, I confess that to God, and I yield my life over to him and ask him to fill me with his spirit. Ephesians 5 says, do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery, but be filled with the spirit.
Yes.
And so all throughout the day, I'm turning from my own ways and asking him to fill me, and I'm yielding to him. And I think when we develop that practice of God, your ways, not my ways, sorry, I did it again, your ways, not my ways, he honors that, and he continues to empower us. The second thing is keeping with that vision that I had. I long to help other people, and by God's grace now, I led groups for 6 years, and hundreds of people I got to see firsthand be set free, and went on to coach other people to lead groups. But having a greater why, I want to help people. I want to continue in freedom and show them that you don't have to wait for eternity to walk in sexual health and wholeness. Like God can set you free here and now. I want to go into a marriage, Lord willing, one day, free from porn and masturbation, and to have a healthy future family and marriage. And so that vision. Another thing is I've continued on with that life of no secrets, and I've set up healthy habits and behaviors that help me. Guardrails. For example, one of the things that has really helped me is you identify 3 things in your life. First, what is considered a relapse for you? And so for me, it's porn, masturbation, acting out sexually. Second thing you focus on is what is going to set me up? What's the temptation before the temptation?
Yeah.
What is going to set me up to even want to go to those things that are a relapse?
Yeah.
And it's certain things like isolating. It's not having accountability software on my computer. It's just disregarding my emotions. It's starting to isolate and not sharing anything and not having a life of no secrets anymore. And so if I see myself drifting towards one or more of those temptations before the temptation, I know I'm in dangerous territory.
Yeah.
And that helps me set back. This happened several years ago. I was like, wow, I am starting to drift and go back to some of those unhealthy behaviors. I need to reassess things. I need to reach out. I need to tell people that this is going on in my life.
That's
and
good.
Then the third category is focusing on, what am I focused on? What am I giving most of my energy towards? It's serving God. It's loving God. It's loving other people. It's investing in ministry. It's these healthy habits like how I eat and going to the gym and making sure I do a 24-hour Sabbath on Sundays and refreshing my soul and living at a sustainable pace where I'm enjoying God's good gifts and community and time with Him, so that I'm not burnt out, I'm not stressed out, and I'm focusing on the vision and who God has created me to be.
Yeah. I remember you telling my husband and I on a phone call that you pleasure stack.
Yes.
And that sounds so wild,
Right.
granted, because of what we're talking about, but you pleasure stack. You do things that are pleasurable in your life, like taking vacations or staycations, right? Can you tell us about your pleasure stacking?
Yeah. In my defense, pleasure stacking is a psychological term where there are just good things that are rewarding, that your brain loves. Like this morning, right? We all went to coffee, and I got 2 pour-over coffees, and they were bomb. They were just so good. So that was some pleasure stacking. And then I had the avocado toast. And then we talked about doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And then later we're all going to lunch, and things like that. Or on the 24-hour Sabbath that I do, I'm getting good coffee. I'm spending time with friends. I'm having a cigar at night and talking to the Lord. I'm not cooking. I'm not doing any laundry, any chores. I'm filling my day with good gifts from God and doing the day with Him. And it's like Christmas every week. It's like a reset for your brain that one gives you something to look forward to, but also is a way to reflect back and rest just like God did on the seventh day.
Yeah, I love that God not only took you through a healing process, but then has taught you really how to enjoy life. And I think that's something that so many people miss out on. I remember living most of my life just not enjoying life. I remember traveling all over the world when I was in the adult industry and literally staying in my hotel room until the time that I had to go work. I mean, I'd be in Japan, I would be in Jamaica, I would be all over the world, and not experiencing the beauty of life because I was so hurting and so broken. And so I promised God one time, I said, if you ever allow me to travel again, I will thoroughly enjoy it.
Yes.
And now here I am years later, traveling over the world and getting to go to Indonesia and in Bali and all these things, getting to hold a monkey and just thoroughly enjoying the life that God has given me. And you don't have to have these super high highs to enjoy life. Like, this is the day that the Lord has made. And so we will rejoice and be glad in it. We can find joy in the mundane. God has shown me that even in the mundane can be miraculous when you invite the presence of God in. And so there's times where I'm like washing my dishes. It's mundane, right? I'm cleaning up around the house, but I'm just start singing out in a worship song to the Lord, and I feel his presence as I'm doing the mundane, and suddenly that becomes miraculous. And for me, that's enjoyable, enjoying the presence of God. Okay, so how do you believe that porn has shaped our culture and church?
So many ways. I constantly am thinking about how just like a fish is swimming in water. I've never asked a fish. I mean, we can't, but like, does a fish know that you're
I mean, I
in
talk
water?
to fish
Right.
like
You're
all the time.
a fish whisperer. Like, do fish know that they're in water, or are they just so that they don't know? They don't even see it. It's just like, this is life. So we are as a fish is in water, so we are in a pornified world and culture. And so we so often don't, if we're growing up outside of the church, or even if we're growing up inside the church and it's not really talked about, we don't know what the difference is between healthy sexuality and God's design versus a pornified culture. In fact, this was a couple of years ago, a study was done asking teenagers, where have you learned the most about what sex is? And over half of them said pornography. And so it is just the new normal, the new sex ed, obviously so harmful, so far from this idea of beauty and commitment and things like that. I mean, lust is selfish and love is selfless. Lust takes, but love gives. Lust is about the momentary and is purely physical, but love is deeply spiritual, emotional, mental, relational, and we don't even know there's a difference there. And so we have so settled for the counterfeit because it is all around us. So it shapes our view of sex, our view of ourself, and really robs us of this deep love, commitment, intimacy that we can have. And also, if you're celibate, thinking about Paul in the Bible, thinking about Jesus, fully sexually whole, they lived life to the fullest. Like our culture says that sex is a need, but it's not a need like food, water, shelter.
Right.
And so we can honor God's good design even if we're not living into sex or having sex, even if we're celibate. And so it's harmed in so many ways. It's shaped relationships. I think the way we see it shaping relationships too is porn and sexual addiction teaches people to hide, to isolate, to be afraid of being known, to be afraid of intimacy. I don't mean physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy, to be afraid of being seen. And so it affects our relational dynamics and the ability we have to have a sustainable relationship where we're known, loved, accepted, safe, where we're not afraid of those things. And I think traditionally the church, I mean, if anyone's been a Christian for a long time, You may have heard of the purity movement back in the 90s, which was essentially preached this sexual prosperity gospel, which was not biblical. It was like, wait, and then when you get married, go nuts, and you're going to have the best sex ever. And it doesn't take into account, we live in a broken world. And what about the lies I believe about sex that need to be changed? And what about this idea that, you know, what if something happens to a spouse and we can't have sex the way this sexual prosperity gospel promised we would? And it makes sex ultimate, and culture makes sex ultimate, when reality is loving God and loving others. That's our primary mission, and that is ultimate. And sex is a good gift, but it's not ultimate. It's not even a need.
That is so, so good. My husband and I, we wrote the book A Call to Purity, and I was like fired up about this book. When I heard the word purity, I was like, yes, Lord, I've done things the wrong way my whole life. I want to do things your way, not understanding that purity actually means to be uncontaminated. It's a heart thing, right? But, and so I'm like doing research for this book, and I realized that there was the whole toxic purity culture. And that was the first time I had heard of it. And I've had people reach out, you know, that have been triggered by just the word on our book, the word purity. And so they immediately fight, not realizing that our book really is about getting to the issues of your heart. And yes, we do have a chapter on sex, because we do believe that God's design for sex within the bounds of a marriage is a beautiful thing. But yeah, of course, like you're going to have, like we've had women like, oh, well, I waited and I was a virgin, and then I met my husband and he was just like, you know, a pervert. Like he was sick, but it's because corn infiltrated him, right? And so by the time he got married, he may have saved himself from marriage as well, but now he wanted to try out all these abusive perversions that he had seen in corn. And so we've had that a lot. And so, yeah, it's not just because you save yourself from marriage, it doesn't mean that you're going to initially have the best sex life ever, but you can grow into that. Like if you are waiting for marriage and then you get married and you've put all your hope in that, like know that like communication around sex, you can actually have a great sex life, but you have to ask each other, what do you enjoy? What do you like? What don't you like? You know, and try new things. That's your partner. That's your partner for life. Like enjoy your sex life with them when you get to that point. But yeah, that's wild that you bring that up. And then you're talking about relationally too. Another way that I've seen corn affect relationships is I am noticing that 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 23, 24, 25-year-olds are all single. They're not even pursuing relationships. And I have this instinct within me that says the reason why you're not pursuing a relationship is because you're struggling with a corn addiction, right? Because you have no desire, because your needs are already being met. And so I'm seeing, like, you know, obviously we see most people are getting married later on in life. And personally, I got married at 29. I wasn't ready to be married any younger. I was in the corn industry, but I'm seeing this happen with even Christians. And statistics say 70% of men in church are struggling with corn, 30% of women. And so people are waiting longer and longer to even start dating. And I really believe that not all, but a lot of them are probably struggling with a corn addiction. That was so, so good. And I'm just hoping, praying, and believing that this conversation is going to set so many people free and give them the tools that they need. So thank you again, Ben, for being on our show. I'm so grateful for you and I so appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Uncensored. If you liked this interview, please give it the thumbs up, comment below. I always love to hear your thoughts and I communicate with you in the comment section, and I will encourage Ben to do the same. I hope that you have pulled so many tools, including community, getting into the presence of God, and really doing things that are going to help you pleasure stack, doing things that your brain enjoys other than looking at corn. But go ahead, if you need to, rewatch this video, take some notes, because I know that if you keep filling yourself up with the wisdom that Ben shared today, that you too will get set free. I love you so much, and I will see you in my next video. God bless you.